Brothers, listen well. There is a disease more dangerous than poverty, more destructive than failure, and more humiliating than defeat. It is the curse of foolishness. It is the prison that holds men captive while they believe they are free. It is the weight that drowns them while they laugh, unaware of their own sinking. A stupid man is not simply uneducated. Many wise men have never seen the inside of a school. A stupid man is not simply poor. Many great men have risen from nothing. No, stupidity is something worse. It is the refusal to see, to grow, to change. It is self-imposed blindness. And so, I warn you today, watch for these 6 signs in yourself before you point them out in others. Sign 1. He speaks more than he listens. A man who speaks more than he listens is a man who betrays himself without even realizing it. His tongue moves faster than his mind, and his words flow without measure, yet they add no weight to his character. He mistakes noise for wisdom, volume for authority, and the act of speaking for the art of knowing. He does not understand that every unnecessary word he speaks is an opportunity lost. An opportunity to learn, to grow, to strengthen himself in silence. A foolish man is quick to interrupt, eager to dominate conversations, and restless when others speak. He listens only to respond, not to understand. His thoughts are not shaped by knowledge, but by the sound of his own voice. He craves attention, believing that if he speaks enough, if he commands the room long enough, he will be perceived as intelligent, as powerful, as wise. But what he does not realize is this: the more he speaks, the more he exposes his ignorance. A wise man knows that words are precious. He does not waste them on empty conversations or meaningless arguments. He speaks with purpose, with precision, and only when necessary. He is not afraid of silence, for he knows that silence is where wisdom is born. He listens carefully, not just to words, but to the unspoken truths behind them. He observes body language. He notices hesitation. He understands the weight of pauses. A fool, on the other hand, fills every quiet moment with noise, fearing that silence will expose him. There is a reason the greatest warriors, the sharpest minds, and the most powerful leaders have all been men of few words. They understood that words, when used carelessly, weaken a man. A man who talks too much cannot guard his thoughts. He reveals his plans before they are ready. He exposes his weaknesses before he has had time to strengthen them. And he invites enemies into his mind before he even realizes they exist. He speaks of his ambitions, his desires, his strategies, and in doing so he allows others to manipulate him, to use his own words against him. The man who listens, on the other hand, gathers knowledge like a weapon. He allows others to reveal themselves while he remains unreadable. He studies his surroundings. He understands people. He learns from their mistakes and their wisdom alike. When he finally speaks, his words carry power because they are born of patience and understanding. His silence makes him unpredictable, and unpredictability is a form of strength. A foolish man does not seek knowledge, he seeks validation. He speaks to impress, to prove himself, to feel important. He interrupts, not because he has something valuable to say, but because he cannot bear the thought of not being the center of attention. He disregards advice, dismisses perspectives that challenge his own, and surrounds himself only with those who echo his words back to him. He builds an illusion of intelligence, but it is a fragile illusion, one that shatters the moment he is truly tested. Look at history, and you will see that the greatest downfalls have come from men who could not control their tongues. Kings who revealed their strategies too soon, warriors who boasted of victories before they had been won, politicians who spoke when silence would have saved them. A man who cannot hold his tongue will never hold power for long, for he gives away too much too easily. In everyday life, this weakness is just as dangerous. A man who talks more than he listens will struggle to build meaningful relationships. He will drive away those who could have taught him, those who could have guided him, those who could have made him stronger. He will fail to understand the needs of those around him, fail to recognize opportunities, and fail to see danger before it strikes. His arrogance will blind him, and his ignorance will be his downfall. A wise man, however, does not need to prove himself with words. His presence speaks for him. His silence commands respect. When he does speak, people listen, because they know his words carry weight. He does not waste time on petty arguments, on senseless chatter, on words that do not serve a purpose. He chooses his battles wisely, and he knows that the strongest man is not the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who speaks only when necessary. A man who listens is a man who learns. A man who learns is a man who grows. And a man who grows is a man who cannot be stopped. Sign 2. He blames others for his misfortunes. A man who blames others for his misfortunes is a man who has already surrendered to weakness. He looks at his failures and sees only the faults of the world, never his own. He points his finger at fate, at his parents, at his enemies, at society, at everything except the one person truly responsible for his life. He convinces himself that his circumstances are the result of forces beyond his control, that he is a victim of unfairness, that life has conspired against him. But in doing so, he gives away the only power he truly has, the power to change. A foolish man resents the success of others. He watches those who rise above him and assumes they had an easier path, that they were given privileges he was denied. He does not stop to consider the sacrifices they made, the struggles they endured, or the discipline they exercised. Instead, he finds comfort in excuses. He convinces himself that the world is rigged against him, that no matter how hard he tries, he will never succeed. And so he stops trying. He lets bitterness settle in his heart, poisoning his spirit, turning him into a man who is stagnant, resentful, and blind to his own potential. A man who blames others is a man who rejects responsibility. He fails at a task and calls it bad luck. He loses a friend and calls it betrayal. He suffers a setback and calls it injustice. He never looks inward. He never asks himself, what could I have done differently? How can I improve? Where did I go wrong? He would rather preserve his pride than face the painful truth that his failures are his own doing. But pride without wisdom is a curse, and the longer he clings to it, the deeper he sinks into mediocrity. A wise man understands that misfortune is a part of life. He does not waste time complaining about it or blaming others for it. Instead, he adapts, he learns, he grows. When he fails, he does not look for someone to blame, he looks for a lesson. He understands that life is not fair, but fairness is not what makes a man strong. Adversity is. Struggle is. The ability to endure, to take responsibility, to rise despite the odds, that is what defines a man. A foolish man fears failure because he sees it as a judgment on his worth. He takes every setback personally, as if it is proof that he was never meant to succeed. But a wise man sees failure as a teacher. He understands that greatness is built on mistakes, that every strong man has been humbled, that every wise man has been foolish before he found wisdom. He does not waste time blaming the world, because he knows the world owes him nothing. If he wants something, he must earn it. If he loses, he must try again. If he falls, he must stand back up. The man who blames others will never move forward, because he is always looking backward. He lives in the past, in old grievances, in stories of how he was wronged. He surrounds himself with people who share his mindset, people who also believe they are victims, people who reinforce his excuses and keep him weak. He drowns in self-pity, mistaking it for self-awarenessness. He does not realize that every second spent blaming others is a second wasted, a second that could have been used to improve, to work harder, to change his life. Look at history, and you will see that the men who changed the world were never the ones who blamed others. They were the ones who refused to accept defeat. They faced hardships, betrayals, failures, and instead of crying about them, they found ways to overcome them. A man who blames others is a man who removes himself from the battle before it even begins. A man who takes responsibility is a man who sharpens his sword and prepares to fight. Strength does not come from comfort. Growth does not come from excuses. A man who wishes to be strong must first accept the weight of his own failures. Only then can he begin to rise. Sign 3. He thinks short-term. A man who thinks only of the present moment without considering the future is a man who builds his own downfall with his own hands. He sees only what is in front of him, never what is ahead. He chases pleasure, avoids discomfort, and seeks immediate rewards, never stopping to consider the consequences of his choices. His actions are dictated by impulse rather than wisdom, by desire rather than discipline. He does not plan, he does not prepare, he does not invest in himself or his future, and because of this he remains weak, unprepared, and easily broken by the hardships of life. A foolish man lives for the moment, believing that tomorrow will take care of itself. He wastes his money on fleeting luxuries, spending without thought of what will happen when the well runs dry. He indulges in every comfort, avoiding anything that requires patience or sacrifice. He refuses to endure short-term hardship for long-term gain, choosing instead the easy path, the convenient option, the pleasurable escape. He does not realize that every shortcut he takes, every moment of discipline he avoids, every decision made for temporary happiness rather than permanent strength, is a step toward failure. A wise man understands that the future is built in the present. He knows that discipline today creates freedom tomorrow, that sacrifice now leads to abundance later. He does not chase after immediate gratification because he understands that the greatest rewards come to those who wait, to those who work, to those who endure. He invests his time, his energy, and his resources in things that will make him stronger, wealthier, and wiser in the years to come. He is patient, for he knows that patience is a weapon that separates the great from the ordinary. A man who thinks short-term is a man who destroys his own potential. He allows laziness to take root, convincing himself that hard work can always wait for another day. He spends his youth in pleasure, only to find himself weak and unprepared when the weight of responsibility finally arrives. He ignores his health, treating his body as if it will never fail him, until the day it does. He ignores wisdom, believing he already knows enough, until he is faced with a challenge he cannot overcome. He ignores discipline, believing that life should be easy, until the world shows him otherwise. A man who refuses to think long-term will always be at the mercy of those who do. He will work for men who had the foresight to build something greater than themselves. He will struggle while others thrive, not because life is unfair, but because he refused to prepare for the future while he had the chance. He will look back with regret, wishing he had made different choices, wishing he had sacrificed more, wishing he had built instead of consumed. But by then, it will be too late. There is no honor in a life wasted on fleeting pleasures. There is no strength in a man who cannot delay gratification for something greater. The strongest men, the wisest men, the most successful men, these are the ones who planted seeds when others were eating the fruit. They understood that nothing great comes easily, that all things worth having require patience and sacrifice. They were willing to suffer now so they could thrive later, and because of that, they stood above the rest. A foolish man mocks this idea. He tells himself that life is meant to be enjoyed, that thinking too much about the future is pointless. But enjoyment without discipline leads only to destruction. There is nothing wise about living recklessly today, only to suffer tomorrow. There is no strength in a man who cannot control his impulses, who cannot deny himself comfort, who cannot see beyond his immediate desires. A man who cannot think beyond the present moment is a man who will always remain weak. A man who refuses to plan for the future is a man who will always be controlled by those who do. A man who chooses pleasure over discipline, ease over struggle, and comfort over sacrifice will always be a slave to his own foolishness. Sign 4. He seeks approval over truth. A man who values approval over truth is a man who has surrendered his soul to the opinions of others. He does not stand firm in what is right. He bends to whatever will make him liked, whatever will make him accepted, whatever will make his life easier. His words are not his own, his beliefs shift like the wind, and his character is molded by the expectations of those around him. He is not a man of principle, but a man of performance. A foolish man fears rejection more than he fears dishonor. He would rather be accepted by the crowd than stand alone for what is true. He changes his opinions depending on who is listening, never wanting to offend, never wanting to be seen as different. He avoids confrontation not because he is wise, but because he is weak. He does not defend what is right if it makes him unpopular. He does not speak the truth if it comes with a cost. He is a man who would rather be comfortable than be strong. A wise man understands that truth is not always easy, but it is always necessary. He does not say what people want to hear, he says what must be said. He does not seek approval from the world, because he knows that the world is fickle, that people are quick to praise and just as quick to condemn. He is not concerned with the opinions of those who do not live his life, who do not fight his battles, who do not walk his path. He seeks only to be right in the eyes of his own conscience. A man who seeks approval is a man who is easily controlled. He can be manipulated with flattery, swayed by pressure, and broken by criticism. He does not make decisions based on wisdom or strength, but on fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being alone, fear of standing out. He becomes a puppet, allowing others to pull the strings, allowing society, friends, or even strangers to dictate his actions. He does not lead his own life. He follows whatever path will make him the least uncomfortable. This kind of man will compromise his values to fit in. He will lie to himself, convincing himself that it is better to go along with the crowd than to stand against it. He will remain silent when he should speak. He will agree when he should oppose, and he will accept what he knows is wrong just to avoid conflict. In doing so, he betrays himself. He becomes a man who stands for nothing, a man who is nothing more than a reflection of those around him. A wise man understands that respect is earned, not by seeking approval, but by standing firm. The world may mock him, may resist him, may even reject him, but in time it will respect him. People may not always like a man who speaks the truth, but they will always recognize his strength. A man who refuses to compromise, who stands his ground even when it is difficult, commands respect in a way that no people-pleaser ever can. A man who lives for approval will never know who he truly is. He will lose himself in the expectations of others, constantly shaping himself to fit their desires. He will never be free because he is always seeking permission to exist. He will never be strong because his strength is dependent on the acceptance of those around him. He will never be wise because wisdom requires courage, and courage is something he does not possess. A man who seeks truth, however, is unshakable. He is not controlled by the shifting opinions of others. He does not fear rejection because he understands that a life built on lies is no life at all. He does not need approval because he knows that the only approval that matters is that of his own conscience, and in that he finds true strength. Sign 5. He is controlled by his emotions. A man who is controlled by his emotions is a man who has no control at all. He is a slave to impulse, ruled by fleeting feelings rather than steady reason. His anger dictates his actions, his desires dictate his choices, his fears dictate his limits. He does not master his emotions, they master him, and because of this, he is weak, unpredictable, and easily manipulated. A foolish man reacts instead of thinks. When he is insulted, he lashes out. When he is frustrated, he breaks things. When he is afraid, he retreats. He does not pause. He does not reflect. He does not exercise discipline over his own mind. His emotions rise and fall like waves, and he is tossed around like a ship with no anchor. He makes decisions in moments of passion, only to regret them when the storm has passed. But by then the damage is done. He has burned bridges, lost respect, and weakened himself further. A wise man, however, understands that emotions are not meant to be his master, they are meant to be his tool. He feels anger, but he does not let it control him. He feels pain, but he does not let it break him. He feels fear, but he does not let it stop him. He knows that true strength is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to command it. He does not suppress his feelings, but he does not let them dictate his actions either. He allows logic to stand above impulse, reason above reaction. A man who is ruled by his emotions is easy to manipulate. Those who understand his weaknesses can provoke him, push him, guide him like a puppet simply by triggering the right feeling at the right time. A man who cannot control his anger can be baited into foolish fights. A man who cannot control his pride can be tricked into reckless decisions. A man who cannot control his desires can be led into traps. The world belongs to those who can stay calm, who can think clearly even in moments of chaos, who can act with purpose instead of reacting with emotion. A foolish man justifies his lack of control by calling it passion, by calling it honesty. He believes that feeling something strongly is reason enough to act on it. He does not realize that strength is found in restraint, that the greatest warriors are calm in battle, the greatest leaders are steady in crisis, the greatest men do not let temporary emotions destroy permanent things. He does not understand that patience is power, that self-control is a weapon, that a man who can rule himself can rule anything. The world does not care about how a man feels. It does not reward those who cry about their circumstances, who rage at their hardships, who allow themselves to be carried by every emotional storm. It rewards those who can endure, those who can think, those who can remain steady no matter what they face. A man who cannot control himself will always be at the mercy of those who can. He will always be weaker than the man who can remain calm, the man who does not allow his emotions to dictate his fate. Sign 6. He fears hardship. A man who fears hardship is a man who will never be strong. He avoids struggle, shies away from discomfort, and chooses the easy path whenever possible. He wants success without sacrifice, growth without pain, and reward without effort. He sees difficulty as something to be feared rather than embraced, as something unfair rather than necessary. And because of this, he remains weak, fragile, and unprepared for the realities of life. A foolish man believes that struggle is a sign of failure. When faced with obstacles, he complains. When confronted with pain, he retreats. When things become difficult, he looks for a way out instead of a way through. He believes that life should be easy, that suffering is an injustice, that he deserves comfort simply because he exists. But in running from hardship, he runs from the very thing that could make him stronger. A wise man understands that hardship is the forge in which strength is created. He does not fear difficulty. He welcomes it. He knows that every challenge he overcomes sharpens his mind, strengthens his body, and hardens his spirit. He does not complain when things get tough. He gets tougher. He does not run from struggle. He faces it head-on. He knows that nothing worth having comes easily, and that the greatest rewards belong to those who have suffered for them. A man who fears hardship will never achieve greatness, because he will never push himself beyond his limits. He will stay where it is safe, where it is comfortable, where he is never tested. But comfort is a slow poison. It weakens the body, dulls the mind, and steals the fire from the soul. A man who refuses to suffer will never grow, and a man who never grows will always remain small. Hard times create strong men, and weak men create hard times. This is the cycle of life. A man who refuses to struggle, who avoids hardship at all costs, ensures that he will be unprepared when real challenges arise. He will crumble under pressure, collapse when tested, and break when he is needed most. He will not be a man that others can rely on because he cannot even rely on himself. A foolish man spends his life searching for ease, believing that happiness comes from avoiding pain. But true happiness is not found in comfort, it is found in conquest. It is found in pushing past limits, in enduring suffering, in coming out stronger on the other side. The man who embraces hardship, who willingly takes on challenges, who does not shy away from struggle, he is the one who will rise above the rest. He is the one who will know the satisfaction of true strength. Pain is temporary, but weakness lasts forever. A man who refuses to face hardship today will suffer far worse consequences tomorrow. But a man who endures, who fights, who embraces the trials of life, he will emerge unbreakable. My friends, strength is not given, it is earned. A man does not rise by chance, nor does he stumble into greatness. He is forged through discipline, through struggle, through an unshakable will that refuses to bow to weakness. A man who speaks more than he listens, who blames others for his failures, who thinks only of the moment, who seeks approval over truth, who is ruled by his emotions, and who fears hardship. Such a man is his own worst enemy. His downfall is not caused by fate, nor by the world, nor by those around him. It is caused by himself. The weak man finds comfort in excuses. He talks when he should be listening, missing the wisdom that could save him. He blames others for his shortcomings, refusing to take responsibility for his own fate. He chases fleeting pleasures, blind to the destruction his short-term thinking will bring. He molds himself to the expectations of others, sacrificing his integrity in the desperate pursuit of approval. He lets his emotions dictate his actions, acting on impulse rather than reason. And above all, he fears struggle, avoiding the very hardships that could transform him into something greater. But there is another path, the path of strength, of wisdom, of true masculinity. The path of the man who listens more than he speaks, who learns from those wiser than himself. The man who takes full responsibility for his life, who does not waste time blaming the world, but instead seeks to improve himself. The man who thinks long-term, making decisions not for temporary pleasure, but for permanent success. The man who stands firm in truth, unshaken by the opinions of others. The man who controls his emotions rather than letting them control him. And the man who does not fear hardship, but welcomes it as the fire that will forge him into something unbreakable. The difference between weakness and strength is choice. Every day, a man must choose which path he will take. He can choose the easy road, the road of excuses, of self-pity, of comfort and complacency, or he can choose the hard road, the road of discipline, of sacrifice, of relentless self-improvement. And make no mistake, this choice determines everything. The world is not kind to the weak. It does not reward those who complain, who avoid responsibility, who chase comfort instead of challenge. It belongs to the strong, to the men who refuse to be broken, who sharpen their minds, who strengthen their bodies, who harden their spirits against all adversity. To the men who do not seek an easy life, but instead seek to become men worthy of the struggle. Rise above weakness, reject mediocrity. Choose the path of discipline, of responsibility, of truth. For in the end, it is not the world that will determine your fate, it is you. Thank you. May you walk the path of strength, and may God bless you.